You warned us. All right. Thank you for everybody for braving the cold and coming out tonight. And thank you for everybody joining us via the internet and not being crazy enough to go out in the cold. So tonight we're going to talk about one of the topics I think that's one of the more interesting topics we get to talk about here. And we're going to talk about some of the early residents of what will become not just New Jersey, but what will become North Bergen. All right. Today we'll be discussing the Lenni Lenape. All right. And what their lives would have been like here, what their society was like, and how they really left an impact on the state, especially when it comes to the naming of certain places. So, sure.
Is it okay? We make up like an audio video recording any part of this, or is that not okay?
I'll be putting this on YouTube.
Really?
So we get an
Yeah.
answer.
Okay. So what is in a name? And again, when we talk about like Native American names, my name? Oh, my name is Michael Marion. Oh no, that's okay. Yeah, I'm nobody compared to these folks here. All right. So really, when we think about the names, right, we're really familiar with certain Native American groups in this country, you know, the Cherokee, the Apache, the Iroquois, right? The ones that make the history textbooks, right? The Lenape really don't hit the history textbooks. And it's a shame because they're kind of one of the first people to interact with Europeans when they come here, right? And the interaction is not great. When Henry Hudson shows up here, they actually go out on a couple of canoes into the Hudson and start firing bows and arrows at them. Suspect from the beginning, right? But what is in about their name? So it is a two-framed word, right? Lenni meaning original, genuine, pure, or real in the Algonquin and Umani languages. Okay, Lenape just simply translates to man. Okay, so these folks were extremely revered by other tribes, and we'll get into that in a minute. Now, they obviously did not call this place New Jersey. Okay, that was not part of their dialect, right? It's not part of their lexicon. I will try to do my best here, and this will probably be one of the last times I try to massacre their language. They refer to more or less the kind of southern part of New York, New Jersey, a little bit of eastern Pennsylvania, and down into Delaware as Lenape Hakenik. Okay, again, that was my best interpretation of that. And again, it's mostly today of New Jersey, Manhattan, Staten Island, Brooklyn, Queens, Rockland County, and parts of eastern Pennsylvania. So they had a large portion of land that they considered theirs. All right. The meaning of the word just simply translates into the land of the Lenape. That's really all it comes down to. Okay. Now, again, at the time of like Henry Hudson's arrival, at the arrival of the Dutch, they estimated there was only about 15,000 people in that entire territory, which, like by today's standards, just to compare this, there's 9 million people in New Jersey, right? So 15,000, they were extremely spread out. They were sparse throughout the state. Okay. They lived in about 80 seasonal villages. So they would travel with the weather. Again, most were established in the area, especially here in the Hudson, Bergen County areas. Most of them are going to be established along the Hudson River. Okay. And now the map here's kind of got a little funkiness to it. It's a little sideways, right? So to put it in perspective for you, we got Long Island right here, okay? And then you have the Hudson coming up this way, right, across. Now, again, this is one of the early Dutch maps. And the reason I put it in is just because it really shows that there's not much going on here. There is some imagery of the game that they would have discovered here, right? And you have, you know, very rude drawings of like beaver, right? You know, you have something that looks something like a bobcat. And then I always think it's funny that the turkey is there, right? Because and we have to remember, like Europeans have never seen a turkey at this point. It's a uniquely American animal. They don't know what it is. And they freak out when they see it. Okay. But I also want to point it out because outside of like, you know, some of the English language words that are on here, some of the Dutch written words that are on here, most of these are references to the tribes that were here. Okay, so we get further in the northern part of this map here, the Tapans, right? Now, we know places like Old Tapan, right? The Tappan Zee Bridge, right? That is all coming off the Tapan band of Lenape that lived here, right? The Sanahikans that were once living here, right? These are folks, they're long gone. And they're all, some have names, right? But some don't. Again, Manhattans, right? It's where Manhattan comes from, right? It's named after the people they bought the land off of, all right? And so on and so forth, right? And again, the map kind of cuts off on Long Island. You could see, you know, the beginnings of Montauk, right? Again, another native word, okay, or tribe that was there. Now, again, where they live, again, in a better version, right, that we could kind of relate to today. Here's our great Garden State, right? Bound by the Hudson and the Atlantic, and then to the Delaware to the west, right? We have this land that they also inhabited. And their division of the land is not territorial. They didn't say like, okay, like the Raritan River is the border, oh, the Watchungs are the border. They didn't do it that way. They did it by language. Their borders were set by the dialects they spoke. So they're all speaking a dialect of Algonquin, okay? And then it's split a little bit. There's Muncie that is spoken in the north, right? Unami that's spoken in the south. They did have some common words for like corn, certain animals like wolves, right? However, they did have different words for certain foods. And again, I think that's hysterical, being from New Jersey. Taylor ham, and then there are some people who for some reason call it pork roll. I don't understand those people, okay? But I would imagine the Muncie that spoke this version of the word for food were probably thinking, what were these people thinking, all right? It's a very interesting dialect. And again, the natives that were here also had, they settled an argument long before. They broke the state into 3 parts. North, Central, and South, okay? And again, this is all based on language, okay? And this is also going to play a role in marriage practices as well, okay? So you have this kind of real interesting through line in our history for at least the state, that some of these debates will actually predate all of us being here. This is another great map. It was made like in the early 1900s. And they tried their best to locate the places that natives were once located, okay? So we have, and again, some of these words are very familiar, right? The Tapan are here in the north. You have the Pompton band of tribes, right? Pompton Lakes, okay? You have the Aquanac, which we know as Hackensack, right? We anglicized the word, right? The Raritan, right, for the bay and the river, the Navesink for, again, the river. So you can see that they are leaving this legacy on the state, right? When the Europeans encountered them, they really didn't understand how to write. And again, they didn't write because the Lenape really don't have a written language, right? So they are just kind of Dutchifying these words, Anglifying these words to something they could write down. Again, here's that really interesting map that's going to show us, right, the mouth of the Hudson, right? We have Manhattan, and then all along here, they are going to name off all the tribes that are going to be up and down the Hudson River, right? And again, this is the main source. And again, very similar to us. Look up and down the Hudson River. You can't find an inch of space, okay? And for these folks, they probably also taught the same thing. Everybody's by the river, okay? Now, their society is really interesting. So they lived very close-knit together. Immediate family is the most important. Then comes your clan. Then came your friends, right? Then came the village. Then your surrounding and familiar village, and then people who spoke the same language of you, right? They're very close-knit. They're very tight with their families. And again, their trust kind of fades a little bit the further they get away from mom, dad, siblings. Okay, it's a really interesting system. They have the 3 clans, right, based on their language, and they have 3 identifying divisions. In the north, they represented as the turtle. Okay, in the central part, they were represented as the wolf, and in the south, they were represented as the turkey. Okay, and I always like to point this out to folks who are from this area. Okay, we have that zoo that's not too far from here, big zoo, Turtleback Zoo, right? That was not just some clever marketing name. That has a long tie to the turtle clan that lived there, because next to the zoo, there is Turtleback Rock, which if you go out there, you can see it looks like a turtle shell is coming out of the rock and out of the ground. That is an old Native American site, okay? And we'll talk about the importance of the turtle shell a little bit down the road. Now, my wife always likes when I bring this part up, and she gives me like a look, and she's probably home right now, like watching. The Lenape are a matrilineal clan, okay? They're not like our modern European counterparts and us being a very patriarchal society. The women call the shots, okay? Children belong to the mother's clan. So they adopted all of the mother's cultural and religious practices. Mother's brothers, okay, Bear, that's one we gotta follow here. Your mother's brother might have been more significant in raising the children than the children's own father, okay? Leadership is passed through maternal lines. Women could even have leaders removed that they disapproved of. And then women are also going to be in charge of agricultural production and divided like the substance accordingly. So they were in charge of just growing the stuff and dividing it as well. Okay. And then finally, and this is something I also like to tell my wife, which is, you know, I'm still waiting for this invite, but newlyweds would live with the bride's family. Okay. And it's very different from what we're exposed to. Right. And again, it is a unique piece of their society. Now, what were men doing? My wife just says probably nothing, right? But the men were there for production. Okay, they're there for the hunting. They're there to do the heavy lifting of farming, the building, right? The general protecting, right? Men would also marry outside of their clan. And this goes back to that division of the map. It's actually a very complex system. This was done for them to avoid inbreeding. Now, for example, if you were a male from the Turtle clan up north, you would marry a woman from the Turkey clan in the south, okay? That child then would marry someone from the central part of the state, okay? It is extremely complex. And again, for folks that are not writing this stuff down, for folks that have this just being an oral tradition, like this could, like, I feel like this should have been more complicated, but they made it work, right? They also had a practice of blooding where men would be responsible for training all the future warriors. And then again, they would lead raids on other tribes, okay? The Lenape were not known for being a warring tribe. They were kind of like, if you did something to us, we have to do something back. They were not big pushers for territory. It was kind of more defensive actions. Now, what are they eating? And again, this is kind of weird because like we live here, like I grew up here, and like people gardening always kind of blew me away a little bit. Like I'm like, you're gardening in North Bergen? That's kind of weird. All right. But they practice companion planting. So what they would do is plant the 3 sisters. Okay. They would plant corn in March. They would then plant beans at the base of the cornstalk in May. All right. And then they would plant squash in the summer. And this was done because as the corn grows, the bean plant will wrap around and grow up. The squash will grow across the base and keep the ground moist, okay? This way they could harvest well into the fall, and they had constant food supply. It's, again, something that's extremely brilliant, something that we really don't think about, right? Today, we're more used to just go to Home Depot or Lowe's and pick up like the seedlings, throw them in the ground. But these guys are practicing something very complex. Hunting, they use this Lenape hunting technique. It's very smart. Again, we're talking people without firearms, right? We're talking people with mostly handmade weapons. what they would do was drive deer towards water, right? And they would force the deer into the water where it could not kind of get its footing, and that's where they would kill it, right? And that's how they would harvest, or gain meat products. And again, meat is a luxury item for them. They had a predominantly vegetarian or seafood diet because it was just much easier to come across those things, which leads us into harvesting seafood. And again, they're eating seafood out of the Hudson River. All right, they're eating seafood out of the Hackensack and out of the Passaic. But you have to remember, like, much different time, right? Pre-industry. So what are they eating, guys? They're getting fish, but one of the weirdest things, and this always blows, especially when I tell students this, you used to be able to go in the Hudson River and pull fresh oysters right out of the Hudson. You used to be able to go into the Hudson and pull clams right out of the river, right? Now, I'm sure you might be able to do that today. You might not want to eat them, though, if you find them, okay? But for these folks, they are getting this stuff. Again, the Statue of Liberty, at one point, before the statue was there, was referred to as Oyster Island, okay? Because of the oyster beds that were there. So again, very interesting way they were living. Now, their religion, all right, I am going to unfortunately destroy this name, and it is not going to be pretty for me. All right, but they believed in a creator God, okay? This Kishme Longkong, that's the best I got, all right? And they believed he had zero involvement in their daily lives. Like, this guy existed, he created the world, and that was it. He took his hands off the wheel and let it go. Then they believed there was a spirit of life, okay? And they honored that spirit, right? Mantuak, they experienced through different ceremonies, through rituals, and they believe he spoke to them through different dreams and visions, right? So that was the only way they would have that communication. They also believed in Metanuaks, right? Which were the healers, the spiritual guides, their religious leaders, okay? And they were the only one that could really talk back to the god of life, right? There was also Oda, which were wooden dolls that were carved annually. They're said to have like good luck, healing properties, right? And then there's Niaku, which was the animal guide associated with vision quests. So again, they have this kind of somewhat religion, which we're probably used to from Hollywood movies and TV shows, but this is all stuff that would have been going on here in the area we live today. Now, I told you the turtle was going to play a role here, okay? They use the turtle as a calendar. Now, this is some box turtles, because these turtle shells are all the same shell or boxes on the inside. And there are 28 outer squares. They use this, the Lenape used this to say, well, look, there's 13 moons. They count 13 full moons, and that's how they move the calendar. And they said those 13 full moons are separated by 28 days, okay? So for them, that equals 364 days, right? Plus 1 day of rest they had. Okay, so again, super complex, right? The 1 day of rest was used where if there was wars, if there were debts, wars ended, debts were forgiven, right? And it's just a day of peace and reflection, right? And again, kind of sounds like New Year's Day, right? And they're practicing this. Now they're following a 13-month calendar. And again, like I said, 13 moon cycles in a year, which puts their months anywhere from 27 to 29 days, depending on the cycle of the moon. So again, super kind of complex stuff they are looking at. Now let's talk about the folks that are here, okay? The Akinkinshaki, as they are referred to, all right, which was converted to Hackensack by the Dutch settlers. So their major settlements, okay, first off, their summer encampment is at Gemenopat, which most of us know today as Communipaw in Jersey City, okay? Roughly about 1,000 people could be found there in the summer, all right? again, near present day Jersey City, near the foot of Communipaw Avenue, right? Not necessarily all the way out on the water because that's been filled in over time, okay? But it's close to the foot. They had some smaller camps, right? Again, at the Mehukunnetuk, which is their word for the Hudson River. And it meant the river that flows two ways. So if you ever stare at the Hudson long enough, you can see that the river flows both directions, right? And again, they would have a smaller summer camp at Hoboken Hakkinen, which turns into Hoboken, okay? Which actually is going to mean the place where pipes are made. And it's because underneath Hoboken, it's soapstone underneath their land there. There's also Tantaquah, which was their winter camp, which is roughly in Overpeck Park today. All right, give or take a couple of feet out there. Again, this would have been an image, right? This is a Dutch engraving of it, right? Out in Overpeck with the Hackensack kind of flowing through. This comes from Waterloo Village, right? Great place for a field trip, as I always like to say. They have a completely recreated Lenape village out there. Now, who are their allies, right? Because they're surrounded, right? They're all similar folks. Well, you have the Raritan, right? Even though we have the Raritan River, right? Raritan Bay, the original Raritan tribe actually was located on Staten Island. Okay. The Aquaconnock, which are up in Passaic County, the Tapan up on Pascack Valley, right? The Pomptons, the Wampanoags, and the Canarsie, and even this one gets us the Rockaway, right? Now, Rockaway looks like a very English word. We don't know the original spelling or even pronunciation, but we know they were a tribe located on Long Island, okay? Now, again, the Hackensack or the Akinkinshaki belong to the Turtle Clan. Those of the Turtle Clan were held in very high regards, and they're viewed as peacemakers, okay? They're governed by a paramount chief. However, the chief was held to the decision of the Kakasawa, the caucus, which we use today as a word, okay? It's made up of counselors, right? And again, like I said, where the modern word caucus comes from. Their last major chief was a gentleman by the name of Oratam, and he is part of the Tapan tribe or band. You can go see Oratam today because there's a bust of him in the Hackensack courthouse, right? He is even on the city seal of Hackensack. And what's interesting is the mark, right? It says Oratam and his mark. So his signature was an E. Now, we don't know if he knew any English. We don't know if he was aware of it or if that was just something he just doodled down to say, yeah, this is me, right? I'm recognizing this is something. Now, you don't have to go to Hackensack. You can go down to Jersey City and take a look at some stuff in the beautiful Brennan Courthouse, which is open to the public, all right? They have the Repulse of the Dutch by Francis Millet down there. So what it shows is that original Henry Hudson encounter where they are firing at the Dutch as they are trying to come ashore. All right. Again, you get some of the detail here as well.
The Dutch?
The Dutch, yes. And there's a reason for this. I don't really have a great way to say this other than the Dutch are pretty horrible people when they show up here. They are here to make money. And that's all they really care about. They are not here when you compare them to like the British or the Spanish, where they're trying to convert people and trying to set up settlements. The Dutch are here and they're like, let's make some money and let's go home. In the process of this, we have a major battle led by Commander William Kieft, a Dutch kind of war general who kind of goes out on his own. What he's going to do in the winter of 1643 is he's going to attack a settlement at Pavonia in Jersey City. Again, Pavonia, just so you kind of know where that's coming from, it is going to come from a Native American word that is Dutchified into Dutch, which means peacock. Okay, so St. Peter's University are the peacocks, right? Because they are located near Pavonia, right? So it's, again, one of those weird kind of overlaps of history. Now, what happens is Kiev leads a massacre. He kills 120 men, women, and children, okay? The attack unites the tribes around New Amsterdam, around New York, okay, for 2 years, okay? 1,500 natives will actually invade New Netherlands, destroying 20 years of Dutch settlement work. Okay, New Netherlands becomes overcrowded, or excuse me, New Amsterdam becomes overcrowded, and it's filled with refugees from all these fleeing natives. There is a point where the Dutch have to seriously consider their adventure here in America, where they are like, we're done, we're going home, we're leaving. It is estimated, though, the Dutch will actually go on the attack and kill 1,600 natives, all right, during this war, and only about 20 Dutch colonists will be killed, all right? Most famously is a woman by the name of Anne Hutchinson. The natives at this point had unified 70 tribes to fight the Dutch. New Netherlands is on the verge of collapse, but Peter Stuyvesant comes along and signs a peace treaty with the natives in the summer of 1645. Bringing it a little closer to home and maybe a little lighter, if you've got some free time this week, take a walk down to Tunnelly Avenue and head over to the post office down there on 46th Street, because you will find the purchase of territory of North Bergen from the Indians hanging in that library. This is going to be a piece of work by Avery Johnson. It started in 1939 and finished in 1942. It is part of Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal WPA projects, okay? It's funded through the United States Department of Treasury, okay? And Johnson's instructed that his work should reflect local interests. So apparently in 1939, the Lenape were a big piece of discussion in this area. Not sure why. We've never really found anything in any archive that showed interest in it, but Avery says this is what he wants to do. Now, what is he painting, right? Like, what is he talking about in this painting? Well, we know that on January 30th in 1658, the northern end of Hudson and the southern end of Bergen counties are sold to the Dutch, okay? Here's what the Dutch pay. 80 fathoms of wampum, okay? 20 fathoms of cloth, 12 brass kettles, 6 guns, 1 double brass kettle, and half a barrel of strong beer. That's what they get northern Hudson County and southern Bergen County for. Now, through the power of the internet and some good work by some historians way back in the day, they estimated that in 1917, that would come to the value of $675. Give or take for inflation, they paid $15,651 for 2 counties, right? By 1750, right? So now we got about 100 years later, the Lenape will sell off the entire property rights. All right, at this point to the British. The sale was for total $1,755,000. Today, they bought the entire state of New Jersey for $231,000, $232,000. We'll round up. You can't find a shoebox to live in for that price anymore in the Great Garden State. All right.
So that means only Native Americans have to leave the state, or?
So they sold their property rights to it. So the natives in this state were never forcibly removed, right? They were pushed into the southern end of the state, which oddly enough, yesterday, which worked out perfectly for today, they were actually given a huge portion of land back in the Pine Barrens. for cultural usage. But most of the Lenape actually fell into the Nakota tribe. The Nakotas actually wound up moving out to Oklahoma for a while before starting to kind of make their way back this way. But they made their way back probably post World War One into the 40s during the Great Migration eras, like when everybody's coming back to the East Coast for work. But again, how do we know this? Well, it's documented, but there's the great saying about history: it's written by the winners, right? So we really may never know the aspect, but we do know that there are a lot of natives that make their name known in the state of New Jersey, right? Even through today, right? The band of Lenape that still are claiming to be Ramapo, right? They are fighting constantly. They're fighting with Ford, actually, because a Ford plant leaked paint into their reservation area. They fight with the town of Mawa constantly to get tribal recognition, right? Which Mawa won't. Again, ironically, because Mawa is a Native American word. Yeah. So Mawa, I could not, that's right there, meeting place, right? So again, as you're traveling this great state, right? Some towns we know, and some of them are out in the middle of nowhere, right? So I tried to go with the ones we recognize, right? So we have Absecon, which means place of swans, which makes sense because it's on the water, right? Okay, you have Chestatut, which I had to look this one up. It is up in like Hunterdon County somewhere, right? Means place of hogs. Okay, Ho-Hocus means red cedar. You have Hapakon, which means pipestone. Kittatinny, which means endless mountain, which makes sense, right? If you ever look out that way. Mawa means meeting place valley. Manahawkin means the place where these is good land. All right, which makes sense because most of where Manahawkin is surrounded by is kind of tidal flats. So Manahawkin is the only place that has actual ground. Manalapan means the land of good bread. Mantalokan means sandy place. Again, you're at the beach. Okay. Manasquan, stream of the inland of squaws, right? Matawan, hill on either side. Okay. Metuchen, dry firewood. Parsippany, the place where the river winds through. And Peapack, the place of water roots. So you have a couple of good ones. Now, I'm going to quiz you. I kind of gave you this one. Paisley was paying attention. Places you know, maybe. Gomenapog was. Oh, man, you guys failed the test. Communipaw in Jersey City, which means on the other side of the river. Okay. You have, come on, Hackensack, which means, has two meanings actually. It really is a kind of a conflict. It either means flat stream, referencing the river, or stony ground. Again, the Hackensack did control a lot of where we are. And if you've ever dug in the Hudson County area or the Bergen County area, you hit bedrock pretty fast, right? So it could be a reference to there. All right. Hasimus. That's how you can tell this is a northern Hudson County group. Close-ish. This is referencing Haramis in Jersey City, which means the Crow's Marsh. All right. We went through Hoboken again, right? The land of the tobacco pipe. Lackawanna, right? Referencing the train, right? The stream that forks. Right there, you got Paramus, which again, a kid growing up in Hudson County, where there is worthwhile land. All right. So again, you have that one. You have Manhattan, which is Mannahatta, right? Meaning the island of many hills. Right now, again, today kind of hard to see those hills, right? Most of the skyscrapers are the hills today, yeah. But again, if you ever kind of look, if you're ever in Manhattan, it does slope upwards, right? So again, there is still that major hill. All right. It's Passaic, right? Again, meaning valley, right? The Passaic Valley, or water that flows through the valley, right? The Passaic River. Yep, see, cacus meaning snakes. All right. So again, pretty cool. Another kind of give me one to wrap it up. We akin, which means at the end. Okay. So that will kind of do it for me. The Lenape they are unfortunately long gone from this area, yet we are really speaking their language in some way, shape, or form, right? One word I always bring up to students is there's that really horrible looking animal, comes out, scares the crap out of people, plays dead all the time. Possum. It's a Native American, that's a Lenape word, right? There are certain just parts of our lexicon that we have. And again, being here in Hudson County, being in the state of New Jersey, we use it a lot more than we realize it. Okay. So if you are interested more in these folks, and you're willing to take a trip over to the city, they have the Lenape Center, and they have the Native American Museum located downtown, which is a great museum. I suggest people check it out. It's got a lot of great stuff about the Lenape. It's got a lot of great stuff about the other tribes from Manhattan, and stuff from all over the country. So I'll open it up to questions if we got any. Sure, go ahead.
You couldn't pronounce the name at the beginning, Lenape.
Yeah, I struggle with that one. My Lenape. I'm gonna remember that for next year. My 67th Street accent refuses to let that one come out. Sure.
I have a question. I'm an interpreter of Spanish language, and I'm wondering how they communicated, say, the Dutch,
Sure.
the Native Americans, the British. There were no interpreters back then.
No, none. Well, let's rephrase that. There were some interpreters, not willing interpreters. What the Dutch did, what the French did, the British, the Spanish, when they would originally come here, they tended to kidnap somebody, and bring them back to the mother countries and teach them their language, right? No, they would. You're going to learn English. You're going to learn Spanish. You're going to learn French, and you are going to translate for us, right? I mean, I guess one of the best examples, or one of the examples that can be most given, is probably the most famous one is Pocahontas, right? She is, and sorry if there's any Disney fans in here, I'm going to ruin the movie for you now. She was not an adult in real life. She was a young, like early teenage girl when she was married off to a grown man who was not John Smith. It was Walter Rolfe that married her, wound up being in his mid-30s when he married her. He took her back to England to teach her English. And then the goal was to bring her back. But unfortunately for Pocahontas, who did not go by that name when she went to England, she turned into Lady Rebecca. She never made it back to Virginia. She never saw it again. She dies a couple of years, 10 years later in England. Other famous kind of guides, famously speaking, Sacagawea, right? She was taken hostage and taught English, right? Early on in her life. The Spanish would use kind of their missions that they set up out in the West to kind of convert people into speaking Spanish to get them around. So they did have intermediaries, but they were not by choice for the most part. And most of the Europeans did not attempt to learn any of the native languages. It was mostly through, like you were alluding to, hand signals, the showing of items, right? Just kind of general trying to figure out what this guy wants. What does this guy want? What are they doing?
They were not in writing.
No, most of the, and again, we could go back to Oratom, right? Most of them, they have no writing. They don't have a writing system. They never needed one. So for them, just a mark, right, of some kind works, which makes a lot of the work that like the Lenape folks are doing today is they're trying to write their language, and they're having a very complex time of like, well, you pronounce it this way, but how would you spell that? Right. And it's really guesswork on their part. But they're trying to do it. There's actually a great website called Speaking Lenape. where they had a woman who unfortunately passed on. She was much older when they recorded her, but they just recorded her speaking. And you could learn Lenape, learn the Algonquin dialect from that website. It's extremely complex. I've listened to it before and I try. My kids laugh at me, but I keep at it. But yeah, no, the communication it's an unfortunate kind of thing. We'll never really know how it happened. But eventually communications broke down. We know that just through the history books. And force was eventually used if hand signals didn't work anymore. Sure.
So the Lenape were not forced from this area, but yet I don't think I've ever met anyone who.
No, and you won't know. They just left. They moved on. Again, like I said, they went to the southern end of the state. There was a reservation in the southern end of the state. There was a reservation up in Ramapo. But most of them moved with the other tribes as they moved west. Again, by 1750, they gave up the rights to the state, right? So the British come in, and if I feel like if any of us were in their shoes, 1750, by 1776, this country, the colonies erupt into a war that they want no part of.
Mhm.
And the war is going on in this state. There's 297 battles in the state of New Jersey. And we have more Revolutionary War battles than anybody else. So if I had nothing to do with the fight, I know I'd be hightailing it out of there pretty quick. Again, most of them move and avoid kind of the development that goes on here. And again, mix in the fact that we're a heavily industrialized state, right? We are going to be a constant transient population. So it's kind of why we don't have the native population here. Sure, Chelsea, what do we got?
There's actually a couple questions in the chat.
Ooh.
I'm just gonna ask you to repeat them as I go through.
Sure.
First is when you sort of answered already, when did the Weehawken Indians leave Weehawken?
So again, that like Weehawken is not an actual Indian, right? It's not an actual native. It's a word. They would have been part of the Akinkanshaki, the Hackensack band.
Where was that museum that you mentioned before?
So that's down all the way downtown by Battery Park, the Native American Museum.
Next question, where do you go to learn real history? We were never taught the real thing.
Oh man. So the best thing I would suggest is read as much as possible, right? Something I tell students today is please don't trust everything you see on the internet. That's number one. Speak to the experts. If you have a question, I could tell you from spending some time working in the museum, like my favorite thing was getting an actual question about something that happened there. So if you really want to know what the real history is, or kind of the less watered down version, you reach out to an expert. They will answer you. Like they're not gonna be like, no, I'm gonna hide this information from you. Like they will gladly speak to you, because like nobody asks people in museum those types of questions. Usually in a museum, you get, where's the bathroom, right? You don't get, hey, what happened here? So I would say reach out to a real expert, not the guy on Instagram.
Next question, isn't the word squaw derogatory? My last one refers referring to squaw.
Right. So depends on the word itself, right? We know squaw today from, mostly from Hollywood and stuff. And again, it was a Dutch derogatory version of it, right? Squaw could just simply mean woman, right? Depending on the dialect. So again, it's all in context, at least from what I was able to find. Because I was actually a little nervous about putting it up there. I was just like, wait a minute. I was like, that doesn't sound right. But to be historically accurate, you got to put it out there.
The final question that I have right now in the chat box, are there any archaeological sites in Jersey that are from the Lenape?
So kind of, sort of. Unfortunately for us, not in Hudson County. There may be a few in Bergen County. Like every now and then there'll be somebody who finds like the remnants of a canoe somewhere. Or if you go out to like Garrett Mountain, out in Woodland Park, or the old West Patterson, you could find chipping sites on parts of the mountain. So, you can find arrowheads. Oh, yeah, you could definitely find arrowheads if you're looking. But a lot of the stuff that these natives left behind, like, we don't even know where there's native burial grounds. Like Oratam, who we mentioned, like, no idea where he's buried. No clue, right? They might have a general idea. Somebody might say, well, oh yeah, they buried him up in like Passaic County, but like nobody knows where, right? There's no traditional, what we would consider a cemetery. It's just like, yeah, they buried him and that was it. And they left and there's no marker, right? So to try to pinpoint like locations, like, I mean, even if you said, oh, we could go to Communipal Avenue and look around. Communipal Avenue has been covered in concrete for the last 150 years. All right, we're not going to find anything, unfortunately. But if you go out into certain areas, certain small streams in parts of the state, and you look hard enough with the intention, you will find arrowheads, right? You will find some location sites, but there's really not any structural evidence of them from anything they left behind. It was all made of earth and wood, so it would all be gone at this point. But yep, that's unfortunate for that. Sure, go ahead.
Were the tribes completely separated? Did they ever intermingle with each other?
So we're talking about the bands of the Lenape, or we're talking about like the Lenape and like the Iroquois, or so the bands, the Lenape here in the state, they're interacting. Again, they're interacting for marriage purposes, right? They're trading, they're moving depending on the seasons, right? It's not like, oh, well, you're from the north, so stay up there. Like, it's like, no, it's summertime. Like, come on down. Like, you're coming down to our area, you're gonna be by the coast, it's fine, right? Are they working with other tribes outside of the area? Probably whoever is closest to them. And as long as it's easy to get to them, right? You're not going to get Lenape that are going out west to make deals with the Apache. Like, that's just not, it's physically not possible for them to do, right? But for them to say like, well, we'll go deal with the Iroquois in upstate New York. Could it have happened? Yeah, could have happened. We don't have records to prove it though, but it could have happened. We know during the war that they all rally together, right? We know the Iroquois come down during Kieff's war and help surround the city, but we don't really know anything beyond that. All right. Well, that's all I got, guys. Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
What kind of activities?
Fur trading.
Fur.
Oh yeah. The
French and
correct. Yeah. The Dutch showed up here, came into Weehawken Cove, looked around and said, oh yeah. They came in, they saw the Hudson, they saw the East River, they saw what will become the Hackensack River, what will become the Passaic River, and they just saw dollar signs, right? And they were like, well, we're just going to set stuff up and we're going to make our money and we're going to go home. We don't care about religious conversion. We don't care about infrastructure. Just get the money and go, right? That's it. Ultimately, they were also like, just don't let the British get this at all, which ultimately the British do, right? But the Dutch are here just to make money.
as opposed to the Spanish.
Well, the Spanish were also there to make money. They were also there. They made a ton of money. But they also were traveling with the idea of, well, we're going to spread Christianity, and conquistadors that went were also right. They were also like, well, we're doing this for fame, right? Because fame equaled money for them. So there was like a, alternative as well. But yeah, nonetheless, the natives, they leave this legacy, and it's probably easier to find Jimmy Hoffa. Yes, it might be. It might be easier. But we'll see. I mean, the history's out there, guys. And that's my big thing. It's always somewhere. It can't be gone forever. And I will end it on that. I hope you guys have a great evening. I hope to see you guys next month.
What are we doing, Mike?
It's a lot of pressure. So I've been sitting on a story for a while. There is a young girl. It has a happy ending, so it's not one of those. I'm not gonna leave a cliffhanger. There's a happy ending. There's a young girl who goes missing from the old Givenard orphanage that was located down off Union Turnpike. She goes missing for several days and then just reappears. No one knows what happens to this day. It actually will drive the former chief of police, Pat Sullivan, it'll drive him nuts because he cannot figure out who took this kid. So we'll talk about the young missing Sharon Yacko was her name. And we'll talk about how the county went crazy looking for this kid for about a week. And then she just shows up at a church. This is like 1952 or 53. So that's where we're going to go on our wild North Bergen history ride next time. All right. So thanks for coming, people. Thanks for joining us online, guys. Have a great night.